Officially, inauguration is 1 week from today. That's when the incoming president is, as always, sworn in. It's a moment of true living history. You saw it there in the Obama era. The nation watches the new president walk up there and take the oath. Of course, this will be Trump's second time. The latest New Yorker magazine cover has a political satire imagining the coming moment a week away with Trump edged out of the frame. That's just a little bit of his face and tuft of hair you see there. And look who's doing the edging. It is Elon Musk pushing him out of the frame as the main character. You could call this political cartoon satire a kind of commander of the chief. And it is a joke. Political cartoons have a long history, but the joke plays on some real concerns about this unelected billionaire wielding so much power. Now, Musk's spending advisory group has started talking to government staff. They're the ones inside the government who actually will shape the spending decision. Musk is using his group's name to promote crypto he owns. We did a special fact check on that. He's also signaling some of those big claims about cuts that he made were overstated. He also juggles conflicts of interest because his companies have so many of their own contracts with government agencies as he demands spending cuts, but not for his own many government contracts. Meanwhile, billionaires and tech leaders are jostling to appease a brash leader who demands loyalty over truth. There are some comparisons here to George Orwell's 1984, the infamous book and movie later, and its depiction of an oppressive, overly powerful government. So if you say, gosh, is it a little early to be going Orwell? We're a week out of inauguration? Well, I can tell you one of the Orwell comparisons is actually coming from a Trump ally, Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg, but he was describing in a new interview the federal guidelines against medical and vaccine misinformation.
Something out of 1984, one of these books where it's just like, it really is a slippery slope.
That is Zuckerberg's idea of an Orwellian attack. He was talking about mostly Biden-era COVID policy in his new interview with very Trump-friendly podcaster Joe Rogan. Although when it comes to government overreach, while Zuckerberg is playing the Orwell card on the outgoing administration, it was Donald Trump who embarrassed Zuckerberg by announcing quite recently that he, the president-elect, thinks the Facebook founder bowed to Trump, because of his past threats.
Do you think he's directly responding to the threats that you have made to him in the past?
Probably. Yeah, probably.
Probably. Yeah. That's serious stuff. It would be up to Mark Zuckerberg to publicly rebut that claim if it is not true. Trump had threatened to literally jail Zuckerberg. And as with so many other Trump claims, vows, and threats, we have to deal in evidence. You don't have to overreact to every post on Truth Social, but you have to deal seriously with someone who is a week away from becoming the commander-in-chief. And I can tell you this, if you haven't seen it, there are reports Facebook took it seriously after those comments. Meta's security teams analyzed how Trump could weaponize DOJ and intelligence against Zuckerberg. That's according to a person who anonymously spoke to CNBC with knowledge of the situation. So, Zuckerberg's team took it seriously. Zuckerberg also now adding a Trump ally to his company board, and he has cited Trump's win directly as his reason to end fact-checking online, which had reduced the belief of Facebook users in certain lies and had also affected their spread. Here was that unusual announcement.
First, we're going to get rid of fact-checkers and replace them with community notes similar to X, starting in the US. We're going to work with President Trump. We're going to catch less bad stuff, but we'll also reduce the number of innocent people's posts and accounts that we accidentally take down.
We won't catch as much bad stuff. We're going to end fact-checking. And all why? Not because of some independent reason or even a business reason, which, of course, businesses make business decisions about profits all the time. In fact, we've aggressively covered the facts around Zuckerberg and Facebook's conduct on that score around the world for years. But he didn't give a business reason. He just said because of the election. Now, Zuckerberg's making a big show of turning towards MAGA and this Trump alliance. We can report that he met with Trump on Friday. You could see his private jet. This has been identified, credit to the New York Post there, as Zuckerberg's jet that he was using that day next to what you see there, Trump's. And here's a little more from that new Zuckerberg-Joe Rogan interview.
It was just never accepted by people broadly. I think people just felt like the fact checkers were too biased. Not necessarily even so much in what they ruled, although sometimes I think people would disagree with that. A lot of the time, it was just what types of things they chose to even go and fact check in the first place. So, I kind of think, like, after having gone through that whole exercise, it I don't know, it's something out of, like, 1984, one of these books where it's just like it really is a slippery slope, and it just got to a point where it's just, okay, this is destroying so much trust, especially in the United States.
So there you have it. If you're keeping track of the dystopian name calling, well, Zuckerberg got in, started the year early, saying the other people are Orwellian. Now, as I've mentioned, there are things people don't like about all kinds of companies and what they do. This is not the government directly, although clearly Zuckerberg is trying to curry favor with the incoming government, but he is saying that he'll reshape Facebook and Instagram basically towards what Trump wants. Elon Musk already did that when he took over Twitter. And that means a majority of social media users in America are going to now see a different stream of information tilted towards those goals. If you care about the truth, if you are interested in why and how people are learning things, then whatever you use to get the truth and facts and information, say possibly multiple news sources or accredited journalists, it's good to keep track of the fact that a lot of other people are going to be getting this. And a heck of a lot of people don't read a lot of news directly. They go on the internet and see what comes to them. Now then, the other most popular social site, and this is important, I've just talked to you about a couple of them, now I'm turning to another one, is a site you've heard of that has not yet, at least, not announced the kind of political change that we've heard from Musk and Zuckerberg. And that's TikTok. And there are many fair concerns about that site. We've covered that too. But TikTok has been a big platform for people across the spectrum, left, right, and in between, in America to share views on the presidential debates, on politics, civil rights, abortion rights, all kinds of issues. In fact, we've often aired clips from the robust political activity on that site in our coverage, because we have pulled the videos and shown you what people are talking about, and oftentimes what Americans are saying back and forth. But that remaining non-Musk, non-Zuckerberg, non-MAGA platform is now facing its own deadline to completely shut down U.S. operations if its Chinese parent company does not sell its U.S. part. The Chinese company ByteDance is saying it will just shut down to comply with a new U.S. law by next week. So this is a huge deal. It's probably gotten less attention than other things. It'll be a really big deal if it happens. A last-ditch appeal to keep TikTok open has just hit the Supreme Court. And the justices had a bunch of questions which led many to think that this court will allow the TikTok ban. In other words, they will not step in and save TikTok next week. Now, here's a quick key moment where the Chief Justice suggests the court may view this as more of a national security priority, where the United States can and has every right to step in and use its power to block what it believes are basically Chinese intelligence operations. So it's not really about, according to the question, American speech.
ByteDance, subject to Chinese laws that require it to assist or cooperate with the Chinese government's intelligence work. So are we supposed to ignore the fact that the ultimate parent is in fact subject to doing intelligence work for the Chinese government?
That is a big question stated clearly. That's the Chief Justice of the United States saying, you've got an adversarial intelligence operation, and it's on tens of millions, hundreds of millions of Americans' phones potentially, and the Congress wants to stop that, and you're asking us to say they can't? Legally, the point is simple. If this app is gathering intel for an adversary, the U.S. government can block that, period. That's what the Congress argued in its powers, and that's what the Chief Justice right there seemed to be sympathetic to. Now, let me play for you the answer in part. I'm keeping it pretty simple, although we've jumped around through a bunch of social sites right now that are going to define how your neighbors and maybe you see the world in the coming years in the Trump era. Here's TikTok's lawyer saying, no, wait a minute. Has Congress ever shut down an entire speech platform?
This is a pretty unprecedented case. I'm not aware of any time in American history where the Congress has tried to shut down a major speech platform.
That's a decent answer. And the times they are a-changing. So just because Congress never did it or even had the technological know-how to do it, because now you can block app stores and other things from serving up the app, serving up TikTok, doesn't mean they can't do it to meet new threats. And that's how the Congress originally viewed TikTok, as a Chinese-backed intelligence threat. Yes, there's a lot of speech on it, but they argued, well, the back door was for an adversary. And yet, if this were a movie, as with so many other stories in the last few years, you might say, gosh, we're jamming a lot in. So you're telling me there's basically 3 big social media platforms, 2 go MAGA, and the other one's about to shut down on the eve of the swearing in of the new president that I showed you at the beginning of this introduction? It's not all a conspiracy. It's not all coordinated. Some of these laws, as I mentioned, were written long before anyone knew the outcome of the election, but it is all coming at us fast, and it is a heck of a lot of billionaire, tax-cutting, pro-MAGA pressure to change whether you get information and whether other people have any kind of fact-checking.
You know, I'm going to speak a little bit bluntly this evening, and I hope you will understand where this is coming from. But I think it is worth being blunt about the fact that it would be hard to run a presidential transition that could be worse than the last one. The last presidential transition was the worst one in American history by a long mile. The last one included the outgoing president inciting his followers to riot and storm the Capitol to try to keep him in power. That's a bad transition, right? I mean, the last inauguration had to have thousands of National Guard troops on hand to protect the proceedings from the threat of more violence from his followers. At the last presidential transition, the outgoing president didn't even show up for his successor's swearing in. That's a bad transition. The last transition Donald Trump was part of was the worst presidential transition in the history of the country. And given how disastrously he performed in that last transition, I mean, you have to just assume that this one inherently will be better. It has to be, right? But I think it is worth being blunt about the fact that it might be close, because this, too, is a terrible, terrible presidential transition. And I think it ought to be more central to the way that we are talking about what's going on in politics and in our country and in government at this moment. Because this is the transition where the president-elect, right, throughout the presidential transition period, has continued to sell his junk, right, his self-branded watches and sneakers and Bibles. He put out a new Inauguration Day edition of his special branded Bible. He's still selling boots. Now he's selling Trump boots and his new crypto, whatever it is, and his commemorative coins and his commemorative guitars. He's selling this stuff while he is the president-elect. Nothing like that has ever happened before. Nothing that classless and tacky has ever happened to the U.S. presidency before. This is the transition where he said at a press conference that it might have been Hezbollah that did the January 6th attack. Really, Hezbollah did it. He also said at that same press conference that he's going to pardon the people who did the January 6th attack. Well, I'm sure Hezbollah will be delighted. This is the transition where he made unprovoked threats to seize territory from 3 other nations. 3 other nations with whom we are allied. And that is, of course, inexplicable to those countries. It's inexplicable to most Americans, but it's also equally very exciting to the dictators of Russia and China, who actually have been either seizing territory from other countries or planning to. And now, whether or not Trump actually follows through on these weird threats, those 2 dictators will have Trump's words during the transition to throw back at the United States of America if the U.S. ever again bothers to object to big countries like theirs stomping on small countries and seizing their land. Right? Welcome back to the 19th century. Sorry, no, there's no penicillin. This is the presidential transition where the president-elect officially became a 34 times convicted felon 10 days before he was sworn in. This is the presidential transition when that same president-elect named a convicted felon, one of his relatives, to be ambassador to France. This is the transition where he picked his son's ex-girlfriend to be ambassador to Greece, and he insisted that his other son's wife should be made a U.S. senator until that effort embarrassingly collapsed. This is the transition where he picked his son-in-law's college roommate to be the hostages envoy for the United States. That same son-in-law then announced that he'd received another $1.5 billion from government-controlled funds in Qatar and Abu Dhabi, on top of the billions of dollars he already got from government-controlled funds in Saudi Arabia. Because you know how Republicans are very sensitive to the ethics of any presidential son doing any kind of international business. This is the transition where the president-elect appears to have just randomly picked people off the TV for almost every imaginable government job. He picked a syndicated daytime TV doctor to run Medicare, the one who says your horoscope is very important to understanding your health. Like literally, what's your sign, baby? That determines your health. He picked Fox News contributors or Fox News hosts or their relatives for Secretary of Transportation, National Security Advisor, FDA Commissioner, Counterterrorism Director, Ambassador to Israel, Surgeon General, Ambassador to the Dominican Republic, Border Czar, Ukraine Envoy, and did I mention Defense Secretary? All of those people he just picked off the TV. He just picked them off of Fox News. He tried to pick someone for Attorney General who was actively under investigation for statutory rape and prostitution. And that one had to collapse, because of course it did, but not before he and the vice president-elect went so far out on a limb for that guy that they made multiple Republican senators publicly promise to vote for that guy, despite the statutory rape and prostitution investigation and all the rest of it. Those Republican senators, are they going to get their dignity or their political capital back? If so, is there like a window where they check in for that? This is a shambolic presidential transition. It is a ridiculously bad, poorly run presidential transition, which ought to be the subject of some discussion in our country. It is not going well. And while the president-elect has already had to withdraw that disastrous Attorney General nomination, and he had to withdraw his nomination for someone to run the DEA as well, that one lasted like 3 days. And then they had to take back whatever that effort was to try to make his daughter-in-law a senator. Again, whatever that effort was. While all of those falling rocks have already fallen onto the proverbial road here, now we're 1 week out from the end of the transition. We're 1 week out from the inauguration. And in this last week, we are about to enter into the part of this very poorly run transition where the confirmation hearings are going to start. And specifically, where the confirmation hearings are apparently going to start falling apart. And I say that because tomorrow was supposed to be the confirmation hearing for Trump's nominee to run the VA, to run Veterans Affairs. Now, most people could not pick that nominee, Doug Collins, out of a lineup as a nominee to run the VA. He is a bit of a walking scandal. The only thing he's known for when it comes to the VA is his stated desire to get rid of it, to privatize it, to no longer have a VA that takes care of our veterans. So scandal enough in the nomination. But that said, Collins' confirmation hearing is supposed to be tomorrow, but today they announced it's not going to be. And why have they canceled the confirmation hearing for Doug Collins? It's because they haven't finished the paperwork and background checks necessary to start his hearings. Oops. The day before that one is supposed to happen, that one is now not happening. Tomorrow is also supposed to be the confirmation hearing for Trump's nominee for Interior Secretary, Doug Burgum. Not a familiar name, I know, but you might remember him as the obscure Republican presidential candidate who had to pay his way into the debates. There was a provision in the Republican primary debate rules where you had to get a certain number of people to become donors to your campaign in order for you to get into the debates. Doug Burgum was nowhere near the sufficient number of donors that he would need to get him into the debate. So he literally paid people to donate to him. He would give you money. He would give you $20 if you turn around and gave him $1 as a donation. And apparently that was legal. But that is how Doug Burgum got into the Republican presidential debates, which, if you don't live in North Dakota, that's the only thing you know him from. Now Trump wants him to run the Department of the Interior, because sure, why not? Doug Burgum's confirmation hearing was also supposed to be tomorrow, but it also now has been called off because, like with the guy they want to lead the VA, the Trump transition was also just unable to get the paperwork together for the Doug Burgum nomination. So now Doug Burgum can't have his confirmation hearing tomorrow either. Both of them called off the day before the hearings were supposed to happen. And now here's word of another. And this one is for the Trump nominee, who I think is probably the least confirmable of any of them. This is the Trump nominee who I would argue might even be less confirmable than Matt Gaetz would have been if they had left him as the nominee for Attorney General. I'm speaking, of course, of Trump's choice for Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. This is the choice. When this nomination was announced, Russian state TV reacted to this announcement like it was the Kremlin's biggest international victory since they launched Sputnik. A source at the Senate Intelligence Committee told us last week that Republicans were hoping the confirmation hearing for Tulsi Gabbard was going to be this Friday, January 17th. So that was the date we had penciled in for Tulsi Gabbard. But it's not happening. Amid multiple reports of yet more trouble getting the paperwork together, Tulsi Gabbard's confirmation hearing is not on the calendar for this week. It has still not been scheduled at all. And this is one to watch, just to see if it ever gets scheduled ever. They have already had to pull two of their botched nominations. They had to pull the botched nomination for Attorney General and also the botched nomination for DEA. Watch this Gabbard nomination as well, given what's emerged just in public reporting on Tulsi Gabbard's background, public reporting more recently on how poorly she has been doing in her meetings with senators. Also, we're all listening very attentively to the conspicuous silence from Capitol Hill in terms of whether or not there is going to be sufficient support for her to even make it through committee. It has been a deafening silence. So if anybody is next to be pulled, it might be, well, there's a bunch. It might be, but Tulsi Gabbard's one to watch.
A federal judge over the last few hours cleared the final obstacle for the Justice Department to publicly release a report written by former special counsel Jack Smith that details his investigation into Donald Trump's criminal efforts to overturn the 2020 election. In her ruling, Trump-appointed Judge Aileen Cannon said she had no jurisdiction over this case, and her decision means we could see that report as soon as midnight tonight. This is all happening upon the resignation of the special counsel, Jack Smith, after handing in a sweeping, much larger report that also details his criminal investigation into Trump's mishandling of classified documents. DOJ says it only wants to release that one to members of Congress as Judge Cannon fights its public release. Joining us at the table, MSNBC legal analyst and former top official at the Department of Justice, Andrew Weissman's here. Also joining us, New York Times Justice Department reporter Glenn Thrush is here, and professor of history at New York University, Ruth Ben-Ghiat, is here. Andrew Weissman, I start with you. Where's Jack Smith? Where'd he go?
So under the rules, Jack Smith, as his final act under the special counsel regulations, has to write a report. And that report, under the rules, is given privately to the Attorney General. So it was really understandable that when he did that, when he handed this in now several days ago, he's sort of done. The issue of all the litigation and what's happening, that's on the Attorney General of the United States as to whether he wants to make it public and the litigation of that. That's not part of what the special counsel does. So I understand Jack Smith saying, we've done what we can do. Remember, he also, you cannot indict a sitting president. You cannot proceed with a criminal case against a sitting president, which is why he moved to dismiss without prejudice the two criminal cases that he had brought because of the imminency of Donald Trump assuming that. But what that really leaves is Merrick Garland litigating the 2 volumes of this final report. And I unless the Supreme Court intervenes, it really looks like at 12:01 tonight. Unless Merrick Garland sits on it for some reason, we should be seeing publicly the volume 1 about the January 6th case with some redactions for instance, grand jury or classified material. But the fight is going to be, and is Judge Cannon is saying, I want hearings, and I'm essentially kicking this can down the road, and it's going to be a slow walk on volume 2 and whether it can go even to Congress, because Merrick Garland has said, I'm not planning on releasing it publicly because I'm concerned about the fairness of a trial for the two co-defendants. Footnote, there never will be that trial. But he wants to give the report to Congress, and Judge Cannon saying, not so fast, I want to have a hearing. If that hearing lasts until January 20th, this is all moot.
I mean, Glenn Thrush, I'm going to ask what I want to ask. How does DOJ continue to get outplayed while Joe Biden is president and Merrick Garland is the attorney general? I've lost the plot on all this. Why don't they go give it to the attorney general and the president and brief the country on what grand jurors made up of peers of Donald Trump found in these investigations that were only halted by his election?
Well, first of all, Garland made the commitment to release all of the special counsel reports, starting with Durham from the Comey controversy. And as everyone well recalls, the report on Joe Biden had profound political consequences, probably as significant as any special counsel report you are ever going to see, certainly more than the ones that we're looking at right now. That's a good question. I mean, they play by the book over there till the very end. And the president has not intervened in previous instances, and there's no inclination, I can tell you, from Merrick Garland or his senior staff, those of them that are still even in the building, to contradict Cannon in any way. It's just an absolutely stunning reversal. All of the power has moved from the Garland Justice Department and Jack Smith to the Trump team. And I mean, the most extraordinary part of this, or one of them, everything's extraordinary about it, but one of the really extraordinary parts about this is Todd Blanche, the man who's represented Trump in these cases, is about to take over as the number 2 in the Justice Department, arguably one of the most important positions in Washington. It's just mind-blowing how things have turned upside down.
Well, let me press you on what else is being suppressed by Joe Biden and Merrick Garland, and it's vital information about the nominee to lead the FBI. I believe it's New York Times reporting that first revealed that one of the witnesses in the Walt Nauta investigation is an immunized Kash Patel. I mean, is that not relevant to the committees that have to consider him to lead the FBI?
Well, it's interesting. I think that's obviously up to the committee in terms of those things tend to be generated by the committee. I'm not sure what the minority has asked for. What I can tell you is that there seems to be Republican unanimity around Kash Patel on the committee, even though a lot of the members privately have expressed reservations about his nomination. I don't think that's particularly a secret. But again, this has to be generated by the committee, and it's not clear what they have asked for. I also don't know how much would necessarily be part of those immunity agreements. Patel took the 5th, it is our understanding, in the grand jury, which endeared him greatly to Donald Trump. But that's an interesting question. What I can tell you is sources on the Hill tell me that they are not going to embark on the Patel nomination for a while until they get through Pam Bondi, the AG nominee, which is going to happen Wednesday and Thursday next week. I am hearing it could be as late as early or the middle of February before the committee turns its sights on Patel, which will, I think, turn out to be a pretty contentious hearing.
Ruth, the study in your book and the study of anemic democracies is riddled with stories not about only the brutality of the autocratic movement, but the feebleness of the democratic one. This feels like exhibit A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
Yeah, well, what Glenn was saying about how the tables have turned and things have gone the way that the Trump team needed them to. It's particularly tragic because when we get this first report about attempts to overturn the election, January 6th, today autocrats don't suppress elections altogether. They keep elections going, as in Orban's Hungary. Even Russia has elections, but they manipulate the system in myriad ways to make elections work for them. And so the more we know about what happened, the more we're armed for next time, because this was I see this, what happened after 2020, as a blueprint or a playbook for what they can do to stay in office indefinitely. So so the way that with the resignations of, Jack Smith, it feels like a defeat. But as long as we have access to information, which is why autocrats go after journalists and prosecutors, anybody who can conceal, can reveal their secrets, we will be more prepared next time.
I want to ask both of you about the consequences of not seeing or not sharing with our allies the intel investigation. I mean, Trump had taken to Mar-a-Lago, and nobody even talks about this anymore. It's just the case Cannon is successfully suppressing because of Nowden and De Oliveira is national defense information. That's what he squirreled away. Do you think that'll come up as part of any of the intel confirmations?
Absolutely. I mean, I really can't stress enough just how important this is. If Kash Patel, we know he, at least in radio appearances, has said that he was aware that President Trump had declassified this information. There are two ways to take that, both not good. One is the way that Jack Smith has said in his indictment and his papers, which is that's not true, which would mean that the nominee for the FBI has lied. That provides compromise. That is also not a good thing for the head of the FBI, to state the obvious. The other way to take it is that Kash Patel told the truth about that, which would mean that the litany of national security information that we have
declassified,
that he declassified all of that.
Yeah.
Now, you ask yourself about our Five Eyes partners, our colleagues, who we count on for our safety, not just their safety. Other people who privately cooperate with us, but don't want it particularly known. This is all so detrimental to our national security. And the idea that there are serious members of the Senate in both parties who understand the national security consequences of that conduct and understand how important the roles of the DNI, the head of the Department of Defense, and the FBI are.
Yeah. I mean, you also have Bill Barr basically saying the criminal indictment against Trump in the Mar-a-Lago documents case was essentially a slam dunk.
Confirmation hearings for Donald Trump's cabinet nominees begin this week, starting tomorrow with Pete Hegseth, the former Fox Weekend host, tapped to head the Department of Defense. The Army National Guard veteran with no experience managing a complex organization like the Pentagon will face members of the Senate Armed Services Committee. He'll certainly face questions from the Democrats on the committee over his past, including allegations of personal misconduct and excessive drinking while he was a host at Fox, financial mismanagement at 2 veterans nonprofits he ran, all of which Hegseth denies, and an allegation of sexual assault in 2017. No charges were filed, and Hegseth claims the incident was consensual, but he paid his accuser an undisclosed amount in 2023. He also faces questions about how his current views impact his fitness to run the Pentagon, since Hegseth has said he believes that women should not serve in combat. But his views on women's rights have been retrograde since his college days, apparently. Reuters reports that a classmate recalled putting up posters by Princeton's Organization of Women Leaders, a feminist group known better by its acronym, OWL. Meanwhile, Hegseth and his friends from the campus's conservative paper, the Princeton Tory, were tearing her posters down and putting up their own, leading to a verbal altercation. adding that as publisher of the Tory, Hegseth ran articles that called homosexuality abnormal and immoral, and argued that sexual intercourse with an unconscious woman should not be a clear case of rape because there would be no duress. He wrote a piece that attacked what he saw as Princeton's gratuitous glorification of diversity. I'm joined now by a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Senator and combat veteran Tammy Duckworth of Illinois. Senator, as a combat veteran, and thank you again, as always, for your service, what concerns you the most about Pete Hegseth? Is it his seemingly retrograde views of women, or his alleged mismanagement of funds, or his alleged drinking, or all of the above?
I mean, hi, Joy. It's all of the above. Frankly, this man is not qualified to lead the greatest military on the face of the earth. I don't know that he could plan and supervise a combat mission. Remember that the largest organization he ran was a platoon. So that's maybe 40 guys. And the DOD is 3 million personnel, civilian and uniform. He's in over his head. There's no way that he's qualified to run the Department of Defense.
Just some little additional reporting. This is from the Princeton reporting. Under Hegseth's watch, the Tory, his publisher, published a cover story in 2002 that put a cartoon owl in a gun sight. And then on page 3 appeared to show the same owl with 3 bullet holes in its head, drops of blood spilling to the ground, which the Tory headline was, "Killing Feminism, Owl Sabotages the Women's Movement," and that's Organization of Women Leaders. We've also had Gretchen Carlson, who more in an up-to-date world worked with Pete Hegseth. She's urged the Armed Services Committee to let Hegseth's alleged victim provide testimony anonymously. Here's the quote. While Mr. Hegseth has allegedly released the survivor from her non-disclosure agreement, his attorney has threatened to sue her for defamation if she were to come forward to discuss what happened to her and if her testimony were to prevent Mr. Hegseth's confirmation. Mr. Hegseth's threats cast a chilling pall on women who simply want to speak out about sexual misconduct and should be, and in and of themselves disqualifying. What do you make of that? We've had something like that. We've had 28,000 service members have experienced unwanted sexual contact in 2023. 82% of them were women. 18% of them were men. 8,515 reports of sexual assault involving service members are still active. Should this man, should the woman who was allegedly assaulted by him be allowed to testify, in your view, or should she be protected somehow and allowed to testify?
So, Joy, that's the problem. My understanding, so there's an FBI report that was given to the top Democrat and the top Republican on the committee to read, but the rest of us were not allowed access to it. And remember that the FBI report is requested by the transition team. So it's requested by the Trump transition team. And they have not interviewed any of the women with significant allegations against him. Well, quite a few of the women with significant allegations against him have not been interviewed by the FBI investigators. These women don't want to come forward because they are afraid. Some of them have young children, and it's multiple women, and they are afraid because of the really attacks and threats to their personal safety and the safety of their children, which is why they have not been able to come forward or wanted to come forward and testify before Congress. That said, my understanding is some of them would like to be contacted by the FBI investigative team with the vetters, and they have not been talked to. And so now we are faced with this incomplete report, and even as incomplete as it is, I'm not even allowed to see it. So I don't know what is in this man's background, and this is a guy that's going to lead, this military. 20% of the force is women. And female warriors who meet the same standards and achieve their positions in the military and go to combat and fight alongside their buddies. And this man is going to lead them, and they don't know if he's going to have their backs.
To say nothing of it, I didn't even mention his seeming sort of non-negative views toward people who are alleged to have committed war crimes. What do you think it would do to the military to have someone like this man who, the right loves to talk about DEI and claim that anyone who is a person of color or a woman is inherently unqualified for whatever job they have? He has no qualifications for this job. There's nothing about him that makes him qualified other than Trump likes him on Fox and his demographics, which the future president seems to like. What do you think it would do to our military to have someone like this come in with no apparent real FBI thorough background check and then be in charge of our nuclear capabilities?
Yeah. Well, I think it would be bad for morale, obviously, but I think it would sow confusion because our leaders in the military wouldn't know what they could talk to the Secretary of Defense about. And by the way, for our allies, I would be reluctant to share information with the United States military, with our leadership, information that would keep us safe and keep our troops safe, because they didn't know if this man is compromised. Remember that the point of the background check is to make sure that the person you put forward can't be compromised, can't be blackmailed, can't be bribed. These are all the types of things that background check is supposed to be providing information to me, the senator, who is going to be part of the advise and consent. So I can't even make up my mind whether or not this man personally is vulnerable to being blackmailed. What if the next woman comes forward while he's Secretary of Defense and say, I'm going to come forward and I have the receipts on you and that sexual assault and I have tape and video, whatever that is. What if Russia comes forward and says that? Now do we have a Secretary of Defense who can be bribed or who can be blackmailed by a foreign power? Because if I was a foreign power, that's what I would be trying to dig up that information on. All of that aside from the fact that he's not qualified to run the organization. He's never run anything bigger than a 40-man platoon. The last two organizations that he was responsible for their financial well-being, they had to bring in a forensic accountant because he mismanaged it so badly. This man is not qualified to run an Applebee's, let alone the Department of Defense. I mean, your local Applebee's manager has managed more people and a bigger budget than he has.
I want to bring in the owner of the legendary Real Inn, Teddy Leonard. Teddy, I don't even know what to say. So many people who live in Southern California love your restaurant so much. They celebrated birthdays there. They got engaged there. They ate a lot of seafood there. How are you?
Well, we're holding up, and I just want to say that all the people, all of our customers that have reached out through Instagram with their stories, the last meal they had with their father before he died, a little boy's Make-A-Wish to come to our restaurant in Malibu, and people getting engaged, a man with a picture of himself as a baby at the restaurant, and then a picture of himself holding his baby at the restaurant. These stories have really buoyed us up during this time. I mean, I can't stop crying because we were such a strong part of the community, and it was not just our loss, it was their loss as well. We started a GoFundMe for our crew because most of them have worked for us 20, 30 years and never worked anywhere else. So getting a job for them is going to be difficult. So we are trying to cushion at least 3 to 4 months' salary for them. My husband and I really were evacuated from our home. So right now we really haven't completely, I think, processed what's happening to us, the shock of it,
When you read those stories, and I think when you're in the restaurant business, there isn't much time for contemplation. You're working all the time, especially when you're the boss. But were there particular things that surprised you, things you absolutely didn't know had happened under the roof? And does it inform how you feel about whether or not you'll try to come back?
Well, it does. I mean, we had thought we're on State Parks land. We own the building and the business, but we do not own the land. So it's truly up to the state parks whether or not we can rebuild and be a part of the community again. But their stories are now making us think we have to try. We have so many people that have offered, we will come down and help you build it. We will come down. Why haven't you started a GoFundMe for your rebuilding? Excuse me, the smoke here is bad. The rebuilding of it. And yeah, that makes us want to go forward and to put the effort into rebuilding. The stories that have really touched us is how many wedding receptions, memorials, things that were going on there that we didn't even know about. I mean, it's extraordinary. And I can't thank all of our customers enough for their outpouring of love and support, because truly that has kept us going these last 5 days while we're evacuated from our home. So that's kind of what's holding us together.
Do you feel like you know how to even begin? Are you getting help from local authorities, from fellow restaurateurs or business owners? Have you started even that process of figuring out, okay, what do I need to do if I'm going to really be serious about maybe opening the restaurant again?
Yes, we have. We've spoken. We've reached out to the state parks. We're waiting to hear from them. We've spoken to a family friend who does commercial kitchens. He has said he will support us and help us. We're starting to. But again, Chris, to make it clear, we're not home. Our home is in danger at the moment up in Topanga. So trying still to manage what's happening to the rest of our lives as well. It's a little overwhelming at the moment.
What's the one thing you hear most from your employees? What do they need? Obviously, you're trying to raise money so that they can at least have a few months' salary, as you say, 20, 30 years, people who have worked for you. But how are they doing?
They have reached out, and fortunately, most of them live in Santa Monica, and their homes are safe, so they have their families safe. But they have reached out to us and asked what they can do to help Andy and I, and that's the kind of employees we have. That's the kind of family-owned business, small business we were. The culture that my husband created when he created that restaurant. Everyone that goes there and eats there feels like they own it. It feels like it's theirs. Our crew, it was their home. So they have reached out and said, how can we help you? Can we come to your house? Can we do for you? And every time they call, I find myself just very emotional because we're so blessed to have the love and the compassion of our crew, of our clients, our customers. We don't know where we're headed next. We'd like to rebuild, but I guess we just have to wait and see first if we have a home. It's sort of, we're still in crisis mode here.
Well, Teddy Leonard, we can only wish you the best, your employees the best, and we look forward to that iconic sign being lit once again, whether it's even a year or 2 or 3 down the road. So many people have shown so much love for it. Thank you for sharing your story with us. We appreciate it. Good luck to you.